I can manipulate them. Oh no! Oh.
How are we gonna poetically capture the moment?
Only.
Fly not too close to the sun, Icarus, lest thy waxy wings should melt. Are you glad that I was there to do that? My two best contributions was Homeric poetry and nose pen.
It was like
Yin and yang, motherfuckers.
Orson Welles doing a drunken Shakespeare.
Before we begin, the Gamer's Advocate would like to remind you that any episode could contain game spoilers, so watch or listen with discretion. And now your hosts, AMKomnenos, Banana, and Legion. Enjoy the show.
Welcome on into a continuation of our tier list of the Mass Effect companions. And we've made it to Mass Effect 3. There's not very many companions you can get in Mass Effect 3. It is by far the smallest portion. But because the way the game is designed, especially with like the Citadel DLC, you get the most amount of companions you could have in any other game. It's a really weird mesh of information that you get.
Fewest of new companions.
The fewest of new and companions that you could take with you on a mission, you know? Because in Mass Effect 1, you have, I think, 6 total? I have the list somewhere else.
I think it's 7, but one of them dies.
Well, right. Well, that's why I said 6.
Because
I never.
Jacob.
And then, yeah, and then
Jacob and Kitsune.
Yeah. And then Mass Effect 2, of course, there's just a ton. So, and that's what I think draws a lot of people to Mass Effect 2 is because the plethora of stories that you get from that. So you have all these like memories. So even if you don't like 3 or 4 of the characters that you could recruit, chances are you're going to find one that you really like. And that's what makes that game memorable for, like I said, for a lot of people. But going into 3, I think it's really underrated as far as some of the companions go. If it was me, I really would have pushed BioWare. Look, I need at least 1 or 2 more on the ship, just so that we can kind of have a little bit more fleshed out issues, because you have people like Rex who can be on the ship again. You have the Primarch who's on the ship, but he's not anybody who plays. But so you have all these like really interesting characters, but none of them are going to be squad mates for you. So I think we'll start off with James, because he's the first one we meet in Mass Effect 3. As the cinematic unfolds, great opening cinematic, by the way. I always like that ship, kind of like it becomes the shuttle that becomes it's actually like an actual fighter. And it becomes like the kid's toy. And then it goes up to Shepard looking at it, looking down. I'm like, man, what an introduction. It's so simple, but it says a lot there. But the first person who meets Shepard is James. So you got this big hulky guy, and so he's voiced by Freddie Prinze Jr. I almost said the husband of Buffy.
Which actually might speak to a lot more people than
right. Because I could not remember his name. I was like, but I know he's.
Part is that wouldn't have gotten me there either. I'd have just been like, neat.
Yeah, and but they've been married for a very long time. But anyway, he does a lot of BioWare voices. He's the Iron Bull in Dragon Age Inquisition. I think he does a really good job in that. Just for my part, he is often criticized as, nobody wants James because we don't know anything about him. He doesn't have a character arc in the game at all. But the thing is, he's the only one. He's the only one of all the companions, including Shepard and everybody else, that has his own movie. He has an anime for Paragon Lost, and it's actually not a bad movie. But you get a lot of the personality of who James is and why he's so reticent about wanting to leave Earth and, questioning leadership, even though it's Shepard from that movie. So I think it does a really good job of portraying him as an individual. But I still, for me, if I was going to give him a tier list, a solid C, because he's only a soldier. He's not anything else. He's personality-wise, there's enough there, but I don't And also in a game where you don't have too many companions you can recruit from, but he's a solid C either way.
Banana. James is the only character to have his own movie. Have you seen it?
No.
No, me neither. I feel like this is a very global response I've had where people who are fans of Mass Effect know about this movie, no one's seen it. I think James suffers from the unfortunate situation of appearing for the first time in Mass Effect 3. We've had all these games to get to know all of these characters who we love so dearly, and we've met some weird ones. We've met Garrus, we've had Rex, we've had Samara, we've had Grunt, Thane, if we must, and now we're introduced at the start of Game 3 to a fairly bland-looking human. And we have to almost take everything at face value that we're told about them, that they have this relationship, that we have their background, that our character is in some way attached to them. We have to just take it at face value. It suffers from the expositional problem of telling me what's happened as opposed to showing me their relationship. And really, there was no other way they could do it, I don't think, introducing a character in Game 3. But he suffers just from that very, very fundamental way that he's made. We meet him too late, and we meet him for not long enough. Saying that, I don't dislike James. I just don't really find much to love in there either. In-game, I think he's fantastic. He can do some real damage on his own. I can remember James was one of those characters where almost you could just, if you level him up enough, as you get towards the end of the game, you can just let him solo things. He can go off on his own, take down whatever you need him to do. But character level, writing level, lore level, somewhat uninspiring, a little bland, and his voice acting, I think, is very good. But it sounds a lot like Freddie Prinze Jr., and that pulls me out of it, because to me he sounds like the Freddie Prinze Jr. of She's All That. He sounds to me like Freddie Prinze Jr., the wrestling fan. It's the same problem I have with Seth Green voicing Joker. I know your voice from elsewhere, and you just pull me out slightly. Even though you're doing a great job, you just pull me out ever so slightly. So right now, preliminary result, I'm also on a C for our boy.
I pretty much agree with all of that. I think James being introduced in Mass Effect 3 as an Alliance soldier feels odd, given that you were an Alliance soldier in Mass Effect 1. It kind of feels to me like it should have been somebody you've met previously. And then you're introduced to James, and almost like beyond your control, you're kind of a dick to him. Like the first time you meet him, he is asking you what's going on and why you're leaving Earth, and you're like, shut up, we're leaving. Like, you don't get control over that option. You get a Paragon choice at the beginning, which is to like poke him in the chest and tell him to get in line and follow orders. And then the next time you're really like, you get a cutscene with James or any kind of character development, he crashes the shuttle into a Cerberus shuttle, which is, this goes back to our conversation with Zaid and Grunt. James kind of has a death wish, and that's not somebody I want on my team.
Well, I think what gets me with James having the death wish as well, if we can phrase it that simply, because I think it does come down to that. He seems so reckless. You can't imagine much else. Is he really shouldn't? He has so much actually going for him. If you think about how Shepard is sort of given the baton and told to run with it over the course of these 3 games, it feels like James is the next generation. It's almost the person that Shepard is going to hand that off to and say, okay, you take this mantle, you take this power for the next 20 years, 30 years or whatever. He's got an amazing future in there. But the character plays almost as though he doesn't. As though he's got nothing to lose, when really he's got everything to lose. He's essentially being groomed for command almost. And there's that slight, for me, it's not inconsistency. The character deals with it, but it feels inconsistent between the way he sees the world and the way actually the world sees him.
I highly encourage people to watch that anime, and you'll get a little bit more information about where all that's coming from. The story writers are consistent in exactly what you're describing. He has a squad. I'm not going to spoil the whole thing or anything like that.
Oh, you get that story in the game as well.
You do.
He goes through the explanation when he's pushed forward for N7. So he tells you that story. It's probably more detailed in the animated.
Yeah, he
hope
leaves
so.
out quite a bit. He leaves out quite a bit because there's, but basically, yeah, he kind of comes down to like he was trying to do a mission so that it could help humanity and the galaxy as a whole, and altogether, it was all for naught. Wasn't necessary, and yet, okay, I'm trying to remember what was in game versus what was in movie. It's kind of hard to separate. But
You can spoil it. I don't mind.
Well, but I think the main thing here is that to me he's kind of like the opposite of Ashley, because Ashley was perfectly capable but hindered from promotion because of her history with her family, whereas James, they've been wanting to promote him, and he himself has been turning it down because he doesn't feel like he's capable because of the failures that have accompanied him that were no fault of his, but he carries that on him. And that's why he's got that death wish, is because it's not an excuse, but that's how his mentality is. He's like, I've done everything I could. I did what I was told. I did it to perfection, and everybody died anyway. So he's trying to do his best, but he doesn't want to be any higher than where he is. And that's why you have to almost talk him into just going into the N7 program.
Well, he's got the thing that's a fairly classic syndrome amongst people who are very, very good at what they do. He also realizes how much there is that he doesn't know, how much there is that he can fail at. And he's going to essentially then find himself, very comfortable in where he is, knowing how much more responsibility there is above, how many more people's lives will be within his hands. Whereas if he maybe didn't know the job quite as well and was a bit more reckless, he'd take the promotion anyway, thinking he did know everything. It's that idea that we've talked about before, and I can't remember the name of the more you know, the more you realize you don't know.
The Dunning-Kruger effect.
The Dunning-Kruger, thank you very much. And I'd imagine he's suffering quite badly from that. The thing that I do love, by the way, about James is his relationship with Steve. I really enjoy that when you go down, you hear their little back and forths once in a while. Oddly enough, I think Steve is a fantastic character. It's a shame that they're not really a squad mate per se. It almost feels like it with how much they come down, they're helping you out, and they're always there to get you out of the shit when things get real. But I would have loved to have had Steve in the party at some point.
Yeah, just like Joker is in the DLC. So, and he's not. No, he's not. He's not, is he? He's just in the bar. I thought for a minute that he was, but oh no! It's Mass Effect 2. He is. You play as Joker.
Mm-hmm.
You have to stumble your way through the ship, don't you, as Joker?
And that's what I was thinking. I knew somewhere in my head is like, no, you do something with Joker, but yeah. Mm-hmm. But I think James. Banana, did you ever give him a grade?
Not yet.
We'll wait.
I think I don't really like James because the only kind of insight into their qualities beyond just being a soldier is that discussion you have about the N7 program. And that's when he tells you basically one side of the story to say that I did all of this stuff, people died, and then it turned out to not matter anyway because Shepard destroyed the collector base. So in the only kind of story or character development that I had with James, he kind of paints himself as a failure. He basically shows that he resents Shepard for Shepard's success because Shepard's success meant that his failure and the lives of the people he lost were kind of meaningless. And it shows this uncertainty in making this decision. So these are all like very unlikable characteristics. And I don't know that James ever gets redeemed from that in my eyes, because he does have a very understandable reason for feeling that way. But I don't care. Shepard has, depending on the backstory you go with, almost the same story and is likable. Shepard has to explain to James how to move on. I don't like that James needed a mentor in that regard. So for me, James is very much just a soldier. Doesn't seem like he should be a leader. So the only real character development that I got paints him more negatively than just letting him be a soldier. So I dropped him to a D because he's great in combat. He's an excellent soldier. But the only time you talk about him as anything other than a soldier, it seems like he's unqualified.
So the amount of pull-ups he does not impress you.
Not at all. Oh, that was another thing that
drove me
really, really irritated me about James. In the Citadel DLC, in the party, he's like flirting with Liara in the sense of like suggesting that his physical conditioning competes with her biotics, which is an inherently stupid take, but the confidence he says it with is so unlikable to me. It's such an irritating personality trait.
But he's not the only one. There's three parties on each side, so they're all kind of.
I believe I get the same ickiness from when he insists on calling Jennifer Hale Shepherd Lola.
Mm-hmm.
It's something about the way he is, the way he says it. I really don't like it. Oddly enough, I think the loco for Commander Shepard male works pretty well. You can see sort of where that's coming from. The Lola just feels so disrespectful. I
agree with that completely. But I think there is a little bit of redemption there because I think James is shown in that Citadel DLC to not really take himself that seriously. It is very much just kind of this bravado, this facade he puts up. And that makes it a little bit better. But if the version of yourself that you're trying to portray is an arrogant prick, it's going to take a lot to redeem yourself from that. Like, why is that who you want to be?
I think weirdly enough, he would have been, if the series were done over, if we'd have had him from game one, I think he could have really moved quite far up the tier list.
Mm-hmm.
I don't find him irredeemable. I don't find him uninteresting. I just find him a little shallow because of how little time we spend.
Yeah, because even if he wasn't like a companion necessarily, but if you ran in his circle in 1 and then he's not around in 2, but he shows up in 3, you have those connections because it's consistent with the movie too. So
yeah, if he could have had a role on the ship, something like Exo Presley has, or something like that, you'd seen him, you'd heard of him. That would have gone a long way.
The weapons person, because that's really just Rex down there. Rex and Ashley.
I'd love to hear James and Rex talking. I'd love to hear that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, now, one thing I think, just me personally, I think with James, it's just some lore stuff here. Just like I personally think Garrus and Tally are the canon romance together. I think James and Ashley work because they do kind of get together if you have Ashley alive. And you can kind of push them in that direction. And I think they kind of work together, oddly enough, because they don't really take it too serious, but at the same time, it just kind of works. So
imagine that, Ashley ending up with a human.
Yeah, of course. Somebody else might have gotten it wrong.
I feel like you're twisting those words there.
Is that what they meant?
The situation where they don't apply.
Anyway, so I think we can confidently probably. I could actually argue a D. I mean, as much as I like him, I could argue the D. But I think he deserves the C. It's just, I just think he does.
I think Com did point out he's not an irredeemable character. I mean, I've made criticisms of the character, but I don't think it's any of the things that I've criticized are obstacles that can't be overcome. I think they are all things that could have been written to show growth on James' part, but it didn't happen. And it's the fact that it didn't happen that drops him down to a D for me. Because all of those things could be developed. And if James were introduced as an arrogant prick in Mass Effect 1, and then comes around in Mass Effect 3 to basically acknowledge his past mistakes and become better, he would move way up the tier list. But that doesn't happen.
I've played a lot as an infiltrator, and that final mission that you have when you make that push to get the batteries going to shoot at the Reaper, I take James and I take Ash. They're just meat, because they hit hard, and I don't need a biotic to kind of miss. They do really good against the Banshees. I mean, it's just bullets against them. And so, yeah, I take James just for that one mission. If nothing else, level him up for that one because he can take the hits. So,
yep, I think he's a fantastic in-game character. Use him a lot on the battlefield. Underwhelming, sadly, in his development. Not irredeemable. Could have been so much more. He's a solid C from me. I think he's the definition of a C.
Yeah.
There's so much more that could have been done. There's so much they didn't get wrong. But he never gets his head above the average. So put him in a C and just wish that in hindsight we'd have had him for 2 more games. He could have gone up way easily to a B or an A. Easily.
Okay, so we're going to move on to our next one, and it's going to be Javik. Javik is the Prothean that we discover. It was a day 1 DLC. For me, when I first played the game, the first couple of times with him, I didn't like him at all. Like, at all. I mean, as far as a likable, not necessarily utilitarian, but as far as likable, I probably would have put him around a D or less. But I think I know where he's coming from. I mean, he is also soldier first. He just comes from a different alien path. And he has a different mindset for everything. And what's odd is that as a soldier or as a personality, I like him a lot better now. But I don't like his powers. I don't like his abilities. He does have one ability that's really, really good. And it's basically a biotic ability where he sends out like these little insect type things, very similar to the collectors. And they basically do a DPS. And I really, really love that because you combine that with singularity or warp or anything, and it just does a really good job. But overall, I don't really care for him because he's supposed to be the soldier, but I see him more of as a biotic B tier. I don't really need that. I can get somebody better. But for me, I think overall his story is interesting. A lot of the stuff he comes from is interesting. It really explains the Protheans. It really helps me understand where 1 and 2 were kind of coming from. And granted, Liara was the one researching them, and apparently we knew nothing about them. But it bridges that gap to kind of show how the galaxy every 500 years or so has dealt with this, and his cycle. He's talking about how his cycle dealt with it and how the history before that happened. So you kind of get this recurring idea that helps solidify the story in the bigger picture. So I think he's really necessary in that regard, but he has personality and his utilitarian squad stuff, I would say C. Another C.
I think we're going to have a sort of quite different opinion with Javik. When you mentioned that you think over time you learn where he's coming from, you understand his character a bit better. I feel his character was so straightforward from day 1. He's a dick. He is just an absolute dick. And he's designed to be that, and it's wonderful. I love it so much. He's one of my very, very favorites. We're told over the course of these 2 games, primarily via Liara, but also through the codex entries and the world around us, that the Protheans are these enlightened beings almost. They're on a different level to what we were. The loss of their civilization is one of the greatest calamities that the world could ever have seen. They came the closest, as we go on through Mass Effect 3, to completing the Crucible. They were so close to being where we end up. And actually, in the end, they're vile. He is the only one we meet, and he is incredibly unpleasant. Everything he tells us about himself and their society makes it sound worse and worse and worse. They were very much this jackbooted power, stepping on anything beneath them, dragging it in forcefully into their empire. It sounds horrible. They weren't this enlightened group of cultured meditation yoga teachers. They were the most brutal, centralized fascistic space army that's probably ever existed, and it's gone. And he knows almost nothing about it as well, and I love that. Our one living Prothean that we still have in this world, who's still recognizably Prothean, didn't even live when the Protheans were in their heyday. He's born and their world is already being destroyed. He's born and they're already on the run. It's almost as though looking at me, you and Banana as eyewitnesses for humanity in the 18th century. We know so little about it, and we would just be talking about what we think it was like. I just find him fascinating. I really do. And there's one big thing that I think goes a long way to explaining his dickishness. I think there's no other word for him than that. He's just that. He's surrounded by what he views as primitives. His entire society, that glorious apex, zenith, and apogee, they probably sang about, because it was all gone by the time that he exists. They were probably singing about this around the campfires, how the glory days of the Protheans were, how much better they were than everyone else. And now it's gone. And he's the only one left. And he's surrounded by people that were so much lower on the evolutionary chain than they were, that the Reapers didn't even care about these species. And if we expect him to not be an ass, I think we're expecting far too much.
I think there is another word beyond just dick. He's a Prothean supremacist.
Yes.
Fucking space racist. And I don't know why Ashley gets more shit than Javik, because Javik never comes around despite all of the evidence. The entire time he's on the Normandy, he is making snide comments about the primitives around him. And it's just like, dude, your entire race is dead. They can't be better than anyone else. They're dead. And there's so much evidence right in his face that the Protheans are not this supreme species and never were, but he still clings to that idea and continues to be a dick. He's so incredibly unlikable for me. That being said, I love that dark channel power. I think it's so much fun. I've only really played with him on story mode, which is how I've been getting through Mass Effect 3 to kind of do my research as quickly as possible. But he was not in the original for me, because I got the original when I had no money. So I bought the game used on eBay, and it was the vanilla game, no DLC, and I was not going to pay for the DLC. So I played through all of Mass Effect 3, never meeting Javik. And then my most recent playthrough, which is ongoing, I was playing as of this morning, is my only experience with him, and he's a jackass.
Well, you might be going through the same arc I did, because that was how I felt when I first played him. And like I said, I've grown to like him. Like, I think Com is suggesting, like, I don't like him at all. And that's not, no. I like him. I just think that he provides more context than I like him.
So I think he's a very interesting character and provides us with that insight that the Com was saying, that we kind of put the Protheans up on this pedestal and they don't deserve it at all. And Javik is the evidence that they don't. And that is a really kind of interesting way to go with the Prothean species. Yeah. But he's so unlikable.
Yeah, to be very clear on where I stand, I think it's a fantastic character. He's going to be up there as one of my favorites. I hate him as an individual. I think he is vile. He is repulsive. In the same way that a great villain, I might adore the character arc, I might adore the writing, I might adore the performance, whilst finding them repulsive. That's Javik for me. I am a huge fan of their existence in the game. I'm glad they're there. Personally, he's an asshole. But he will suffer in the grading system through no fault of his own, purely through the fault of the development team, because Day 1 DLC is vile. It is a disgusting practice. Day 1 DLC. If you've been incorporating something into the game from the beginning, that should be in the game on release. I have no inherent problem with DLC. Honestly, DLC expansion packs, I think they have a massive place in the gaming industry. No problem with it. I do have a problem with Day 1, especially when he feels as fundamental to our understanding of the world as he does. He's not a cherry on the cake that came out 1 year later to help us learn a bit more. I feel he's fundamental to Game 3. So he suffers badly for that. And much like Banana, I didn't play my first playthrough with Javik. I had to go back and play probably on my third time. I would have had the DLC, and he suffers a bit for that. And I think you'll probably find that a lot of us on our first playthrough, especially if we were of an age when maybe, myself, I would have been a bit older than this, I would have bought it myself. But if you were sort of 14 or 15 when the game came out, and maybe your parents had bought you it, they wouldn't have known to buy the DLC or to buy the activation card for it. So I think anyone who played this game as a kid for the first time, they almost certainly wouldn't have played with Javik. And that's such a shame. Because I'd love to give Javik an A, but purely for these commercial outside reasons, I won't be able to go higher than a D, I think. Than a B, sorry.
That was quite a demotion.
Yeah, I'm really against it.
Yeah, I really love this character, but I fucking hate BioWare, so he gets a D.
Yeah, I definitely don't want to put words in the developers' mouths or anything, but when it was released, it was actually probably released a little too soon. I don't think it was ever intended for it to be a day one DLC. I don't believe that they think it was going to be ready. And then when EA got a handle on it and the publishers and said, hey, look, this is going to come out on this particular day, because there are stories of how the main game developer, what he was trying to do, like there's a moment with Tally, right? In the image of Tally where you get to see what she looks like under the hood. That was done literally a day before it was finally put into code and put onto a CD or whatever. And just the day before. And so a lot of things were like rushed right at the last minute. And so I couldn't really say that it was intended to be a day one DLC. It just kind of happened that way because of the way EA pushed it out. But
yeah, they're not getting the free pass from me. I think not from Banana either, based on the face we were making.
No, as soon as EA got their hands on it, I was like, yeah, they ruined it, because that's what EA does. EA ruins games. That should be their tagline.
Yeah, because I think that there was supposed to be a little bit more to Javik's story too on top of it also. But there is one moment with Javik where the Hanar sees him and is like, you're a Prothean. And so he knows they see them as gods and stuff. So when the community around him starts to recognize who it is, they're like, but we're all scared. We're all like, what should we do? You guys had to live through the harvesting, the reapers. What did you, and you guys didn't survive. How are we expected to? And then he gives a uplifting or an inspirational speech to just the few people that are there. So that is one of the moments where he's not
if you persuade him to. If you just let him go with his own line of speaking, he just destroys any hope they have because he's a prick. I don't think that he gets redeemed because you manually step in and tell him not to be a piece of shit to people who are scared.
Well, I think it's a nice idea actually, and it's something that really boosts him up again in my thoughts. He's probably the most alien of the aliens that you meet. I almost feel as though we impose a quite humanistic, in small h, humanistic morality on the other characters in the universe. We pretty much agreed on this galactic community on a certain set of moral boundaries and the way we are. Even the Turians and the Krogan, they don't align exactly with us, but they seem to agree on a lot of fundamental principles with our main races like the Asari and the humans. And then Javik comes in as a representative of the Protheans with an entirely different moral basis. So I find he's the first alien in the entire series where I genuinely thought, I don't get you. I don't get anything about you. And I love that.
Yeah, he gives, and I brought it up before, but he gives some context about the lore of the game. He even refers to the Rachni. He says, yeah, they were tough in our day too. So he's fought the Rachni. He knows about them, and so he knows how deadly they can be. He talked about AI, and that's why he said, throw it out the airlock, because his people had to fight an AI during his time that did almost the exact same thing that the Geth were doing. So he's familiar with that side of things. So you're getting to see like how things repeat from one cycle to the next. And there's a bigger arc of story here that I think BioWare was telling. And that and without Javik, it makes that much harder to tell.
I just think there are so many opportunities for Javik to grow that he just chooses not to. So in that situation where he's talking about the AI, that's when you're resolving things between the Geth and the Quarians. And there is a possibility that you arrange for peace between the two of them and they start working cooperatively. And Javik never addresses that. He's just like, no, Legion can't be trusted, and then we'll never talk about it again when you prove him wrong. And that just adds to him as an unlikable character. Somebody who is wrong and denies evidence that they're wrong, just ignores it completely, is one of the most infuriating types of people I've ever encountered. And they exist in the real world. I don't need them in video games.
I was just thinking as well, it's very much a side note, but I was just thinking about how much I like what Javik tells you about Liara. That Liara puts, it's not her, it's her society, but we get it through the prism of Liara. They put this image of the Protheans as benevolent sort of space wizards, just kind and sweet and soulful and obsessed with the arts and culture. And really what you're seeing there is just what Liara wants to be true. She wants to believe that the society that came before was benevolent, was wonderful, was wise. And you just get this idea that, or this question of how much did the Asari just sort of put that on the Prothean identity? How much of that was based in truth? And how much of that is just them thinking, we would love this to be the way. We would love this to be the truth. We want that race that actually brought us forward, that helped us up. We want them to be this beautiful society and not this imperial Rome jackboot stepping on the universe.
Well, I think that goes back to what you were just saying, that the Protheans are the most alien race to us because their priority system, their set of morals is so very different from ours. And in the context of anthropology and archaeology, when you are learning about past civilizations, there's not really any information to go on for their moral code. So you kind of view it through the, like you said, like the prism of your own moral code, and you kind of project your own sensibilities onto the data in front of you and skew it in a way that is no longer accurate but makes it easier for you to process. And that's how you end up with this idea of, oh, the Protheans were just the peak civilization because they had all of our morals and they had succeeded in all of these other ways where we haven't yet.
Yeah.
And then they left behind these indicators to help us, which was really potentially more them leaving behind things not by choice, or leaving behind things to destroy the Reapers out of vengeance more than anything. And Javik introduces himself as the soldier of vengeance. That is his whole character. And that is to me, that's a cliche. I've seen that character before. I don't need another one. We all know that vengeance is this kind of self-consuming ideology where you will lose yourself in pursuit of your goal, and once you achieve your goal, you are nothing. We've all seen that play out in other media. I don't know that I needed another character to demonstrate that kind of fall. So there's just so much about Javik that I find so unappealing. But I think the insight into the Prothean people is so interesting that I'm glad there was a Prothean. It's just he's such an ass.
Yeah.
We definitely learned from like Vigil that there were significant other classes and tiers within the Prothean society. It's just that who did they decide to preserve after it was all said and done was, Javik. So yes, they were technologically advanced. They were possibly culturally advanced. We don't know. Javik doesn't even know.
Well, you can see in the fact, the way they talk about it, the idea that we turned off the non-essential personnel first. It's so incredibly utilitarian, which sounds like exactly what they are. And that is a moral compass that we would probably find it quite hard to stomach if that were around us.
Yeah, and I think his only arc, if there is an arc, is when he does go to the Asari homeworld with Liara. That's why a lot of people get told, if you're going to play the game, you might see it on somebody's stream or something, say, make sure you take Javik, because Liara is always going to go with you. But, and if you take Javik, he gives you a lot of context about the Protheans and how they uplifted the Asari. Well, spoilers, I guess, but also at the beginning, there is a commander. I think it's commander, or is it a captain? Asari that's on the ground, and he grabs her and he senses her doubt and everything, and he convinces her, look, you need to get this done. And so he has those moments. And like I said, when you find out a little bit more about the Asari through Javik, that's not really so much of an arc, but he doesn't have to tell Liara some of the things he does. But he's trying to be gentle. He doesn't have to be a super, I think he's fairly gentle. He doesn't
have to say a lot of the stuff he does.
Yeah. Yeah, he says, he like I said, I think he's fairly gentle compared to what he could have said and the way his personality is. But anyway, like I said, it's not an arc, but I mean, if there is one, that's probably where I would put it.
I think there's a James Acaster quote about this. It's like, you don't get to stop being the villain for a day and become a hero. Just because there were worse things he couldn't say doesn't make this a redeeming moment for him. He's still a dick.
I'm thinking about another thing just with Javik as well that would probably be very, very frustrating. The way that the Protheans communicate. I might be mixing this up. It's been a long time, but I believe via the beacons, via the little memory things and so forth, essentially you get the thoughts and experiences and feelings of other Prothean directly into your head. There's no one left in the galaxy he can do that with. Imagine if you were transported somewhere into the future now, and no one communicated by speaking. This very fundamental way that you had of speaking with people and understanding others was suddenly ripped away from you. How jarring that would be, to now suddenly be in a world where this very fundamental sense, this very fundamental thing that makes you you, is now completely worthless. You would be so displaced in that moment. It would be so disorienting. And I think you would never actually quite get over that. I'm looking, by the way, for reasons, not justifications, for why he's a dick.
I think that's certainly fair. I think the fact that he no longer has, first of all, he no longer has his people. That is devastating. That is completely understandable for him to just focus on vengeance. I get that. But he still has the ability to read every other species, so he can understand people. They just can't understand him. And it kind of feels like that sets it up so that it should be very clear to him, or it should be a priority to him to speak in a way that makes him understandable. And he chooses to speak in a way that makes him unlikable. And it's like, everything about these other species from a touch, and you choose to be a dick to them, knowing it's not going to endear you to anybody, and knowing that they're your only hope. Like, you are just going out of your way to be a dick at that point.
I would like to see something where he became more involved in the current galaxy, definitely. I do want to see some leaning towards finding a respect that's there. I don't know how you could have done it when his personality is so defined by that rush for vengeance without just turning him into another cliche. It's an awkward character to work with, and I think they made their own lives difficult in the way that they made their own lives difficult with James as well. Doesn't mean I don't like the character, I just don't know how you could have done it better.
Yeah. So I said C, and what did you say again, Com? Did you say B?
I've got him in a B, yeah.
Okay. Banana?
I said C as well.
Banana Vic is C.
Yeah, I'm going to choose to believe that wasn't a Freudian slip, that right after you said he kind of looks down on everybody, you mixed up the character with me.
That's okay.
Channel law.
I don't want to be the condescending one.
Channel law. Respect it.
These two were a little concerned about some of these characters, that they didn't feel like they knew them. I said, I think you know them more than you think you know. But we're going to go on to one.
Now I do. Played like 30 hours of Mass Effect 3 this week.
We got the summer course.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Crash
was on
course
Cliff
on
Notes.
Mass Effect 3.
Craig's Notes? I was on Cliff Notes. Craig's Notes.
Cliff Notes.
Yeah, Craig's List.
Craigslist. Cliff's Notes. Johnny Sins. Yeah.
I don't like that that's becoming a recurring thing on the channel.
Sponsored by.
So we're going to talk about Edie, and what's really interesting about Edie is that yes, we meet her in Mass Effect 2, kind of like the Edie that we know. She becomes a playable companion in Mass Effect 3, where she takes on the body of the scientist, the Cerberus scientist. What's really, to me, the most interesting is that there is an arc from Mass Effect 1. You know, there is a mission that you go to the moon, and I think it's the moon, yeah. And you have these bases where you have to destroy a VI that is kind of part of the Alliance. It's gone rogue, and you have to handle it. Turns out that's the early stages of Edie. And I guess Cerberus picks up the information and applies it and simply advances the technology on it, and that's how we get Edie. And I think that was really, really interesting to kind of combine those stories. I couldn't say that was their original intention, but I think it meshed pretty well. She's pure tech, and I like the fact that she's pure tech because she's more powerful that way. Her decoy works better than it should. Because there'd be one thing is like, oh, well, there's two things. We'll just, you shoot at that one, I'll shoot at this one. It's interesting how it's, if I step back and look at it, a lot of times I try to tell her to put the decoy like somewhere here or there. And if I position her right, I mean, they just go all out, try to get that. They try to go melee, and then I can just, they're in the open so I can snipe them. So it's really interesting how well that works, even though it's one of the few spells or casts or whatever you want to call it that doesn't do any damage that I like. I usually like anything that does damage, My job is to make their HP 0. But I think for me with her and her story, and it actually has a really, really even further interesting arc in near the end of Mass Effect 3. If you find some of the little terminals on the for the Elusive Man station, I started thinking about her story and how it just has more than one arc, and her consistency and her utilitarianism. I think she's an A for sure.
I am almost certainly going to be quite far away from you with this. I did not enjoy the ED in Mass Effect 3. Well, I did and I didn't. First off, I'm deeply uncomfortable with the way that she's introduced in the sense of stealing a body. That's an immensely creepy thing to do. And I found that incredibly off-putting from moment one. It reminded me of the movie The Thing. And he said it. So The Thing, that idea of just taking another body and it becoming your own is the most fundamentally unnerving thing on an evolutionary scale that I find it so off-putting that immediately I thought, okay, Edie, you don't get me. Secondly, it felt a little bit like the designers were 16-year-old boys. It felt a little bit like we need a sex bot in the game. We need that Austin Powers character. Or for whatever reason, the game is in some way incomplete. Like, look how hot our new sex bot is. And honestly, it made my dick shrivel. Like, it's so... real unpleasantness. So it's a terrible introduction for her from me. Especially because I quite liked Edie. I like Edie's dialogue. I like where Edie goes in conversations. And this is the real shame, is over the course of the game, I think I really enjoy most of her character development. But I find the initial introduction so off-putting, and I find the horny developer cliche so incredibly that it's going to pull her down a little bit for me. I don't hate the character, but it's not one of my favorites. We're going to end up somewhere around a very, very average C.
I think with the Dr. Eva, though, I never got the impression, and I never got it clarified, but I never got the full impression that the Dr. Eva was fully human. I mean, if she was ever human at all. Now, granted, I don't think she was a full AI, but I don't think she would. So when you say like she was stealing a body, I I couldn't really validate that or argue against it, but I never got the impression that she was actually human.
The lack of concrete opposition to it doesn't help. As long as that vagueness is still there, that it might still be a body, or at least partially, that ick will not leave me.
I think the fact that Edie's arc is very focused on kind of how you define life makes that more problematic. The fact that
Mm.
we eventually come to recognize Edie as a life form, and she becomes a playable character in Mass Effect 3 by stealing a body from something very similar to what we've understood Edie to be. So I completely agree with Com that it feels like she's stealing another life form's body. And the fact that we never get any closure on, oh no, Dr. Ava was just a VI or not even that advanced, that leaves that possibility that she destroyed another incredibly unique form of life and took the body for herself,
Ugh.
is a little, yeah, doesn't feel right.
We
And I
both had exactly the same body
completely,
language in that moment of just, ugh.
completely agree. This game didn't need a fucking sex bot. It is infuriating that this is how Edie finds a body. It's just so unnecessary. And I get you can make the argument that it was like, oh, it was developed by Cerberus and they wanted it to be prepared for everything. Neat. Still weird. Still fucking gross. And the fact that nobody ever brings it up as like, Cerberus are perps, right? We can all agree on that. Like, everybody is just like, have you noticed how hot Edie is? The fuck is wrong with you?
I think that the Cerberus of pervs hidden dialogue would have demanded a certain self-awareness on the part of the developers of the video
Yeah.
game that we definitely can't expect.
Yeah. But I also think the fact that like everybody kind of openly talks about how hot Edie is, and we see Edie as a new life form in its infancy, just
Oh,
adds to the creepy level. The like
yeah.
Edie is very much figuring out what it means to be a new life form. She is a child for the most part. In the same way that when we meet Liara, she's a child for her species. Edie is very, very much younger effectively than Liara was when we meet her. And that they're sexualizing this incredibly advanced intelligence, but an intelligence that it's in its infancy is just it's
Yeah,
so worse.
you've somehow made it worse. You've somehow made it even more gross, and I'm now
Yeah.
very physically uncomfortable.
That being said, I enjoy the romance arc between her and Joker.
Yes.
Because I think Joker is one of those few people who does genuinely respect Edie. And the fact that she is now housed in a sex bot is very much a joke to Joker. It's
Yeah.
it's very much a I liked her when she was a ship. And I think that's very fun. And I'm okay with that romance arc. It's just there's so many things about what they did making Edie a playable character that just do not sit well with me.
Obviously, Cerberus is trying to infiltrate the Mars program to get the information they want. If they just send like a VI that's clearly a machine that says Cerberus on it, it's not going to, cut the mustard. They have to send somebody who's actually an infiltrator. So I do believe that she's actually 100% a cybernetic individual. But again, it's Cerberus reclaiming Cerberus property. I mean, if you want to define it as an individual, fine. But that comes down to the bigger arc of story of Mass Effect. What is life? Whether it's AI or not, if we want to define it as that or not. And then there's some playable options that you're going to say that is not life.
But I think that is kind of the whole point of Edie's character, is
Yeah.
that the idea that once an intelligence becomes self-aware, it kind of becomes a new life form. And there's no evidence to suggest that Dr. Ava hadn't reached that point. So that the idea that she is just consumed by Edie is very off-putting.
And when you think that now we're talking about this taking place directly within Edie's arc as well, it's not some secondary storyline where they're not directly linked and we almost don't make the mental leap directly. Here, we're almost forced to recognize. So thank you, Banana, for sort of really hammering the point home because I think it needs to be done. You have an entire storyline about what life really is, beginning by possibly one of these lives being snuffed out and entirely subsumed, possibly continuing to exist within Edie, yet having no agency over its own body. It is vile.
But that's like the big difference between AI and organic life. That's what the Geth do all the time. And so when you say that, okay, so there's these two individuals that it's unacceptable for, I'm not arguing one way or the other. It's just that's what the Geth do. They absorb that collective information. They don't see them as individuals. They see them as a one unit collective. And these AI can do that because that's how they operate. So
Dr. Ava has a name.
Yeah. Legion has a name.
I think you're already seeing a direct reflection of individualism right there. They have a name.
Yeah. Legion has a name too, and they separate him from the group.
Yeah.
Yeah, because Legion has a different thought process than the rest of the Geth. So we establish Legion as a separate entity. And he refers to other Geth as separate entities. So he is inherently recognizing the individuality there. And I don't think that he ever suggests that all the Geth should be absorbed into his consciousness.
He does.
I think he
does at the end. That way he can give them the Reaper code.
I think it's the exact opposite.
Yeah, I've got it the other way around.
He basically gets absorbed into the Geth consciousness to provide them with that information. He's not suggesting that they assimilate into his version of reality, which is what Edie forces Dr. Ava to do.
Right. We don't know the events of Mass Effect 4, but from everything I've seen so far, I could be right about that. It could be that he injected his personality into their information. He could be the last one that, because we're going into way spoiler territory, but yeah. But I like I said, we can argue all day about whether or not that's actually what happened, but from everything I've seen so far, and again, I'm making leaps. There's nothing concrete here, but the only art that we've seen looks like Legion. And if we we know the Geth are going to play a part. Well, how are they going to play a part if all that's true?
But I think the conversation you get with the Geth after Legion makes that sacrifice shows that Legion has been absorbed into their collective, and they recognize him as an independent entity who gave them a gift. And they say he'll be honored. We'll recognize him for his sacrifice, but he's gone. And it's trickier with the Geth because what we think of as Legion is very much the intelligence. He is software for the most part and constantly refers to the hardware as kind of a separate entity from himself. So for him to be absorbed into the collective does kind of suggest that he continues to exist, but it's very much not the forceful way that we see with Edie.
I think it's really
Legion
that. It's the fact
presents them with information and they accept it.
Yeah.
Edie overrides Dr. Ava and she disappears completely.
Yeah, I think Banana's really hit it on there. It's the lack of consent either way, really, with... it's the complete consent that exists in both directions with the Geth. So Legion puts the software, speaking in a simple language I can, because I don't understand it, into the Geth, and it's accepted, whereas Ava is just subsumed, is taken over, has no spirit in this. And also the Geth one is, I think, just a little bit more complicated as well, because the absorption of this also then permits, possibly, the ability for them to exist as individuals. So you end up on a different philosophical question entirely. Just what is the very nature of what's happening here? The destruction of the one is allowing the individuality of the others. So they become immensely complicated as questions.
Yeah, the Geth are doing things that are totally unique to any other AI that's come before. And we only know that because of the previous stories we have and the other examples that we have. The Geth are uniquely unique to AI. So, like I said, I'm trying to draw a distant similarity and apply it toward this one. But I mean, it's loose. But I'm just saying is that that's the way AI think, is that the absorption is possible. You just can't do that with organics. But that's where we start drawing the line of, is it actually alive? But that's...
I feel like you're making a generalization right after saying
the
Geth are unique, to say that AI thinks this way, when really the Geth think that way.
Yeah.
The Reapers don't.
And we really don't get a chance to know what
the Reapers
would
influence the Geth without absorbing them. They leave them separate. They elevate them to a position that basically means they will always be on the Reaper's side and they will be more capable, but they don't get absorbed into becoming Reapers. And Edie, for the most part, with the exception of Dr. Ava, never suggests absorbing the Geth. She talks about them very separately. I think there's only like one time where she directly interfaces, and I think it's in Mass Effect 2. But she interfaces with the Geth network and basically shows this kind of awe of the way the Geth network operates, but maintains it as a very separate thing. There's never an indication that Edie's motivation is to absorb the Geth network to make herself more powerful. So I think it's very much not the way that AI thinks. And I think it also points out that there are very different AIs, and each AI falls into this category of synthetic life, but they're not all categorically similar. And that is what makes Edie's absorption of Dr. Ava even more problematic, in that the AI potentially that Dr. Ava could have been is unique. So being consumed and being replaced by Edie almost represents genocide.
You had a nice moment there as well when you hit on the Reapers, because I had to go and reflect on it in my head for a moment. I had to go and look up the dialogue as well, because I couldn't remember their nature of the Reapers to each other, because they speak so often, especially sovereign in the we. So it's we have no end, we have no beginning, we are infinite. But then I remember there's also that one line, which I think is very important for this, which is, we are each a nation, independent, free of all weakness. So those Reapers wouldn't see themselves the way the Geth would see themselves. They don't see themselves as this one collective. They see themselves each as individual, distinct entities. And I think you are right, Legion, about the Geth. They're so unique in the entire timeline. Their whole way of looking at things just feels different. And this is why, honestly, in Mass Effect 4, I hope we get to spend much more time with them. It was nice to get some in Mass Effect 3, but my goodness, I want more.
Yeah, and I think when we talk about the Reapers, and this might go off tangent a little bit, but
we already have.
Yeah, but then we have to start talking about, like, what do the Reapers want with the Geth? I mean, clearly they're a military. They're the strongest military actually in the entire galaxy, except for the Reapers. So, but they can't harvest the Geth. They don't help the Reapers in any way. Their code is far superior than what the Geth have. So what do? They manipulate. They say, hey, what do the Geth want? The Geth want more intelligence. They want to better themselves. So the Reapers offer them that. And that's why they don't get absorbed, because there's no point to that. They could just destroy them. But it's just, it makes the harvesting of the galaxy take longer. So really they're trying to manipulate them. So I kind of see that, but at the same time, I do see why the Reapers would just say, look, we don't want to absorb you guys. We just want to give you the code, so that way they're fighting for them. They're a fighting force. That's all they see them as.
I think there's also the argument that the Reapers have this cycle where they harvest organic life, and it is incredibly important for them to draw that distinction between synthetic and organic life.
Yeah.
So when they are presented with synthetic life, it almost, as a coping mechanism, means they have to show respect for it because their whole personality is organics are inferior. They are a destructive force in the universe and they need to be culled. We need to believe that the Geth are above that because we are above that. And the reason we've decided we're above that is because we're synthetic. So if we encounter a synthetic race that is not above that, it destroys our justification. So I think the Reapers need to see the Geth as kind of themselves in infancy. And that is why they are okay giving into what the Geth want. It's not so much because they have a genuine respect for the Geth as much as it's almost them rationalizing their own behavior.
You see this very, very clearly as well in the way that we are really pushed towards developing our perspective as the game goes on. Towards the end of Mass Effect 3, I think we're supposed to begin seeing that the line between organic and synthetic isn't quite as clear-cut always as we might think it is initially. The most clear examples being likely Edie, who for us certainly starts to take on this organic personality, and then the synthesis ending, should you choose to take it, which is very much okay. There is no distinction anymore. And then the Reapers exist as this black and white alternative to that. There is simply the organic, there is simply the synthetic, and as Banana says, their war would be against the organics. And the synthetics, they almost have to ideologically believe that they are in some way better. And I love the way that you said that they might look at the Geth as Reapers almost in their infancy. I love that approach to it.
Okay, so I'll add my 2 cents on that one, because I can't dispute that. That could be 100% true. I don't know the Reaper's point of view by the end of Mass Effect 3. But we do know from Leviathan that that's not why they were made. Leviathan saw cultures grow, and they helped prosper other cultures. They enslaved them for the most part, but they helped them grow. They didn't actually get in the way. They just didn't want them to take over what they had. So each cycle, every so often, that's what they saw. Every 500,000 years or so, a civilization would create AI, and that AI would lead to their own destruction. And so they created the Reapers to tone that down, not necessarily to get rid of humanity, or not humanity, but organic life, but to just settle the system, the whole galaxy down. That was the whole purpose of the Reapers. And then the Reapers said, well, wait a minute. That's you and me. And they turned the table. So to see the Geth as an infancy of them, I don't think that they care about the Geth, just personally. I think that they just, their prime directive was to keep balance in the galaxy to prevent organics from being snuffed out by AI, because every 500,000 years, that's what the Leviathans saw. So to help them, they created the mass relays, but they did it with the Reapers, what we know as the Reapers. And that was kind of like their tools. And they basically would harvest the galaxy to make sure that everything stayed balanced. So I don't think that they care. I don't think really the Reapers really have that altruistic feeling about anybody. They just have a mission.
I don't think we were suggesting it like an altruism.
I completely agree. I don't
think I think we agree much more than we disagree.
Yeah. I think what I was trying to say is I don't think there's a genuine respect for the Geth from the Reapers. I think they just, because of their ideology, this idea that organics will lead to destruction on a greater scale if they are not culled, means that they have to elevate synthetic life above that in order to maintain that philosophy. They have to believe that the Geth are better in order to justify their own existence, because they genuinely believe the reason they are above organic life is because they are synthetic. It's not because they're more intelligent. It's not because they have more context, they can see a larger scope. It's just that they're synthetic. So when they see synthetic life out in the universe, they have to believe that it's better than organic life, or they don't justify their own existence anymore.
Right. I just want to make sure I'm not confused by what you're saying, because the Leviathans made the Reapers specifically to make sure that the AI did not destroy organics, because that's what was happening every cycle. They were on that path. It's like you take the Geth situation, but the Geth are just hostile against the Quarians. That's the way it went every 500,000 years. And so the Leviathans created the Reapers to help prevent that from happening. It was to kind of make sure that life continued, not to, like I said, prioritize synthetics. Or I know that's not what you're saying, but I just want to make sure.
Well, yeah, but I think the reality is that the Reapers step in when a society gets too advanced and creates this AI that will destroy that society. I think the conclusion is that the organic life has the capacity to destroy all life in the universe, and that's why this cull needs to happen. And the Reapers see themselves as the tool that implements this higher power, this justice that needs to be enforced in the galaxy. And the only justification they ever provide is that organic life is a plague. It's destructive. It is the problem. And so they are constantly keeping the problem at bay in these cycles. And they have to believe it's because they're synthetic that they have the authority to do this.
I think there's also two things you could add on top of this as well, which is Harbinger, when Harbinger is speaking to you, Harbinger speaks to organics with disdain. There's genuine disdain in the way they speak. And they refer to humanity being, or all civilizations of this era being raised into Reaperhood. I'm going to go with that word, being raised into Reaperhood. It's not even just changed. And I don't think Harbinger would misuse a word in that way. They're talking about you actually being elevated into this new form. I think they see a very distinct hierarchy between organics and synthetics, and they define it very clearly with one above the other. And the other point is, I think the motivations of the Leviathan matter, but I'm not sure how much they continue to matter as we get further and further into the cycles, because I'm sure the Reapers at this point take on their own motivations as well.
Perhaps, but you also look at,
I think the intelligence is far too advanced not to. Sorry,
you're not wrong. No, you're not wrong. It's just you see a pattern here, because you look at the Keepers, you look at the Protheans, you look at potentially the Rachni. It was almost the Rachni. All these similar hive-minded thinkers become tools of the Reapers. And so that's what I'm saying, is that they are more in the line of manipulating what can help them going into the next cycle or whatever. And so when I think of the Geth, I don't think they see the Geth that way. They don't help them in that regard, because if that was the case with AI from 4 or 5 cycles ago, those would advance from their point, right? There were AI during that time, and that's why the Reapers had to, do what they did. So AI from 4 or 5 cycles ago should still be around, and they should be more advanced, but they're not.
Do we think the Reapers wiped them out?
That's what I'm saying.
I think the fact that every time this cycle has happened, this conflict between AI and their creators has occurred, kind of suggests that war devastated the AI of that cycle to the point that it might not have survived by the time the Reapers showed up. Because, I mean, we're seeing the war between Quarians and the Geth for 300 years before the Reapers get involved. So it's possible that in every other cycle, the AI gets wiped out and then the Reapers show up.
Well, that definitely wouldn't have happened with the Geth, because really the only thing you saw with Saren and his Geth was 1/10 of the fleet, because the other 90% weren't on board yet.
Right.
Like, no.
But as you said, the Geth are different.
They're different, yeah.
They're the only AI who is not motivated to destroy their creators. They're just protecting
There's
themselves.
so many examples about the Geth that we'll just stumble into them,
I think with this, we've now stumbled into pure speculation, to the point where we really don't have anything, because we have no records of the AI from previous cycles. For all we know, the Reapers got the first hint of an AI, which was just essentially Siri in that universe, and they jumped in and said, okay, no, this is where this stops. This is where we dive in now. And perhaps the crippling of the mass, I forget the word now, the mass relay, the one that connects Dark Space and the Citadel, perhaps the crippling of that meant that they were a bit late on the uptake this time, and the Geth were able to develop further than expected. We're into pure speculation.
And I would also be very curious to know how many data points the Leviathans had before implementing the Reapers.
Hmm.
To say that it's a cycle that repeats roughly every 500,000 years and it always follows the same pattern suggests to me that maybe 3 or 4 cycles happened. They were like, we need to address this pattern that is very clear in 4 data points. Like, all right, let's not get ahead of ourselves here.
No, I'm on board with you but for not the same reason. I have no reason to believe Leviathan ever. Like, there's nothing that they say that I actually take at face value. But I don't think that they're idiots either. I do think that they would have created. It's a massive resource to create those Reaper beings. So you don't just do that just to, handle the
Yeah, but
galaxy.
I think
So
there are so many examples of a species, like an entire civilization, being misguided in Mass Effect that you could easily say that they devoted a ton of resources to something incredibly stupid.
The only final thing I wanted to go into now, this is more of a question because I don't think we have a way of getting the answer to this. And it's not a massive point, but it's about what the Reapers do with organic life. So let's imagine we have a cycle, and let's get out of the current cycle, get out of the Prothean one, because they're the two we know about. So imagine 3 cycles ago. And let's imagine you've got an AI starts to wake up, the Reapers get the call, they come in, and they're going to wipe out synthetic life. What does actually happen with the AI then? Assuming that the society who is there doesn't wipe out the AI, do we think the Reapers just wipe it out? Or do we think they'd absorb it in some way? Because the whole thing is about using what's there. They raise the organic life into a new Reaper and create this new creature. Would they just wipe out the AI?
yeah, if you ask me, that's what they do. They have no reason to keep them around because their prime directive is to insecure organic life to continue. Otherwise, they would completely extinguish all life, but they don't. So if they kept AI around when civilization is at its weakest, AI is going to take over. So I do think that they eradicate the AI that remains.
So what was it?
Possibly, I agree with Legion, with the exception of the Geth.
That was my question. Yeah, that's exactly where I was going.
I think the idea is in previous cycle. Well, this my hypothesis at this point is that in previous cycles, the Reaper saw the AI that was created as a tool of the organics that would lead to the destruction of all organic life. So when they stepped in to harvest the organic life, they also wiped out the AI, believing that its goal was to destroy all organic life. That's the conclusion that AI reached in that cycle. When we meet the Geth, we realize that's not the conclusion they've come to. They want to exist. They want to isolate themselves from the potential threat of the Quarians, but they don't want to destroy the Quarians. And that's different. And I think that might be why we don't see motivations in the Reapers to destroy the Geth or to absorb them. Because I think Legion's pointed out, every AI that is generated in these cycles would be inferior to the Reapers in terms of complexity and capability. So there's no reason for them to absorb that new AI. But it's only the Geth that we know about that doesn't have that motivation to destroy organic life. And I think that is kind of where I can make the connection to say that it makes sense that the Reapers would destroy other AIs, since their goal is to preserve organic life at a low level of complexity, and they might see the existence of those other AIs as a risk.
That's interesting. Yeah, I think I just have it slightly differently in my head. In my mind, it was as simple as what I mentioned earlier. I think that the communication was easier between dark space and the center of the universe. Just call it that for now. And the Reapers would have gotten the signal earlier when the AI was more in a fledgling form. And either the societies on the spot would have dealt with the AI as they saw the Reapers coming, or the Reapers would have wiped out the fledgling AI. I just believe that or my initial hypothesis is that the Geth is the very first time that the AI has had the time to get to where it is, has had the chance to develop to where it is, making them in another way unique, making their cycle unique compared to other AIs.
And I'll tell you something more exciting that I find about the Geth is that they're not hiding. They have no reason to hide. They have the largest fleet in military, bar none, compared to the rest of the galaxy. They're not quite to the Reaper size, but they are sizable. They are huge. But where do they decide to keep their servers? Out in the Perseus Veil, out in the middle of the edge of the Milky Way. And so I think they know something about how the Reapers work. And that's why they stay also on the outside, not just within the galaxy doing their thing. They also keep a remnant on the outside. And Legion even says this when you go to his loyalty mission and you do the server where you have to select, are we going to turn them to our side or are we going to just shut them down? He says that this is one of many servers, right? So we have a group here that is conflicted on their own beliefs, but they do carry those servers on the outside. And so when you choose the destruction ending, which me and Banana have talked about, when you choose destruction ending and all the AI is deceased, ED included, I think they go on.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. The fact that the Geth are not seeking conflict. They are not trying, or they're not trying to eliminate the potential for conflict either. They're just trying to remove themselves from it.
Yeah.
And for that reason, why would they move anywhere else?
Well, like I said, I think that they know that how the Reapers work. And if they know that they eliminate AI, let's put ourselves in a position where they can't find us. That's all I'm really going with that.
But
They'll find you.
it might just be that I don't know the destruction ending as well as I thought, but it's relayed. Well, it uses
Good
the
word.
mass relays, right? That's how it's disseminated, this destruction of the AI. There's a mass relay in the Perseus Veil. They're not safe. I have no reason to believe that the destruction does not affect the Geth if I choose that ending.
And we know that even if you don't choose destruction and we just go on to a Reaper victory, for example, so you shoot the Star Child in the face and you bugger off, we have enough links between the Geth and the Reapers to know that the Reapers could find the Geth if they want to. And they could go straight over there and just wipe them out immediately. The Geth don't really have a safe spot.
I don't know, because I mean, even the Andromeda crew got away.
Yeah, but that game sucks.
Yeah.
What does that got to do with it?
Yeah.
They got out.
The game is a fanfic.
They went right by the Reapers. Reapers didn't even notice. I don't know.
Well, the dark space is enormous space, isn't it?
That's where I'm saying that they are. I don't believe. I say they're based out of the Perseus Veil. I'm not saying that that's where their servers are. I think they're outside of that. So if you have the Milky Way and they're like here, they're outside.
Right. I feel like that is entirely speculation, though. I don't know that there's any evidence to suggest that the Geth have established more or less backups outside the Perseus
they have.
Veil.
Now they have. And Legion's already said that there are other servers out there.
There are other servers,
but
he doesn't say they're outside the Perseus Veil.
You don't have any trouble wiping out your own people.
Every sapient has the right to make their own decisions. The heretics chose a path that prohibits coexistence.
That doesn't make sense. If they have the right to make their own decisions, how can you suggest brainwashing them to accept your way?
We stated the option exists. We did not endorse it. It is Shepard Commander's decision.
If they're rewritten, your people will accept them back? Will they even want to go back?
They will agree with our judgments in return. We will integrate their experiences. All will be stronger.
What'd you do after you left the Normandy?
Our physical platform returned to the Geth consensus beyond the Perseus Veil. Data gathered during our mission confirmed that the old machine's return was imminent. We planned for war.
So the Geth believed your proof that the Reapers were coming back?
Of course.
That must have been nice.
It doesn't say they're beyond the
I don't
reach
think
of
it's
the
in his
Reapers.
interest to tell you where they are.
Yeah, but absence of information isn't information.
Yeah, I agree. He probably wouldn't tell you their location, but that doesn't mean you can assume it is safe from the Reapers and safe from the destruction via mass relays. I think you are also assuming that the destruction ending is the canon
It
ending.
is.
You say that. That doesn't make it canon. It's your canon ending. It's not the canon ending.
It is my canon ending, but I feel like they put more effort into the synthetic one. I'm good.
I think
Synthesis.
so.
Sorry.
That is kind of my issue with a canon ending. It seems like the entire story was leading to the synthesis ending because
Right.
there's just so much that says synthetic life isn't that different.
Yeah.
And it almost seems to me like they wanted the synthesis ending to be the canon ending. So I'm not sure where you're getting that the destruction one is the canon ending.
If they went with the ending I think they wanted to, it would kind of make it seem like your choices didn't matter anyway. So they kind of had to incorporate those. So like I said, I think the synthesis endings probably get the most, indulgence with the information, but I do think destruction is probably got to be the canon ending.
I think I just fall with Banana. It fights so much against the narrative they were putting in place already that I don't know what writer would ever do that. It's laying all this groundwork to build a house and then just knocking it down at the last second. Like I said, it is my canon ending because I think my shepherd at that point isn't willing to make that deal. And my shepherd is possibly worried about being indoctrinated. Not actually being, but knowing that might be a thing, knowing that maybe that's what they want me to do. I think he'd be more likely to just take the nope, we're done with this, to hell with the consequences. So even though it feels great for my character, I just feel from a narrative perspective, it would be a bizarre choice for that to be their canon.
I think you highlighted how bizarre it would be because you've said that you don't think Shepard would take that deal when 3 games of information say that Shepard is always willing to make a compromise.
Oh, for
Shepard
sure.
is willing
Yeah.
to always find that odd solution that makes everybody happy if he just puts in this absurd amount of work. So for me, that even more solidifies that he would be willing to take that we'll make this work deal than the no, this is irredeemable choice.
And as it should, because that's what foreshadowing's supposed to be, right? This is what you do with your narrative. This is the character you build over these games. And you're entirely right. That idea that, I think we talked about it recently, actually, that Shepard just at some point always gets it done. Always. That's sort of their one defining feature is you can count on Commander Shepard no matter what. And they always find a way to make a deal. And even in this game, you have the impossible deal of the Geth and the Quarian, at least from the perspective of the galaxy. So why not just have this one last one where they bring everything together? It just doesn't quite fit my headcanon for my guy, that's it. Clearly, narratively, it's the only fucking way.
I agree with Banana. I mean, I think you should have choices, and those choices should matter, and you should have the option to say, that's not how my shepherd thinks. It should go this way or that way or whatever. But the fact of the matter is, I think if the BioWare writers, if I'm right, I don't know. If I'm right about the whole control
Which
thing,
you're not.
Yeah.
Then they need to fire the writing team.
Yeah. Then they need to like just call me up. But if I'm right about the control issue, if that's the main issue, we can talk about AI, we can talk about this and that. But if the overarching theme here is control, Shepard doesn't want the Reapers to have any control whatsoever going forward. And it's a destruction ending. And that's why Shepard lives at the end.
I think there is that kind of possibility that Shepard lives via the synthesis ending. It's just not the Shepard we expect. It's not the same Shepard we've seen through 3 games. And I think there's a way to continue Shepard's story via the synthesis ending.
But it's not your Shepard no more.
It's not the same version. Mass Effect 2, it's not the same Shepard anymore.
I was just going to say that. But I was also going to point out as well that you can also say the control ending. Shepard lives on. It's just very much not your Shepard.
But going to Mass Effect 2, I mean, all I'm going to say about that, they didn't have to kill Shep. I don't know why they killed Shep. They didn't need to kill Shep. It would make more sense if he was just floating in space unconscious and almost to that point of death, and that took Cerberus a while to, bring him back.
I think the fact that they killed Shep and rebuilt him, and then in the Citadel DLC, you have that conversation with Joker, where he's talking about leaving the virtual reality. And he says, how would you even know that you left? I feel like that just opened too many doors to be
Yeah.
like, oh, Mass Effect 2 and 3 never happened.
I did feel when I first played it that the opening 20 minutes, half an hour of Mass Effect 2 was nothing but an excuse to make the character creator make sense in a lore
Yeah,
in a lore
yeah.
reason. Simple as
Yeah,
that.
I do kind of feel like it was their way to say, if you can't import a character, we have to make it make sense.
I mean, there was just so many subtle ways to be able to do this. Like Chev got put into a shuttle of their own, but launched in kind of like Ripley in Aliens, just went in the wrong direction, lost in space. Yeah.
And I'm wondering, you're sitting here thinking, BioWare? Subtle? Nah. By the way, there's going to be such an awkward change in a few minutes' time when we say, so what ranking do we have for ED?
Yeah.
I was waiting. I already know in my head because I've been looking at my timers. I'm like, okay, I got all this I got to cut. But
I think that is. It just highlights how ED is central to the theme of Mass Effect. The fact that we can just talk about the trilogy as part of our discussion of where ED fits in showcases that. I think this goes back to what I was trying to say rather clumsily in previous episodes. The theme of Mass Effect is. I said it was commonality. That's not the right word. It's unity.
Yeah.
It's not the fact that we're similar. It's the fact that there are similarities that can bring us together. And those differences don't need to disappear. And I think Javik even makes a comment along those lines to say that the Protheans failed because they were unified. They were the same. They were homogenized. And they didn't respect primitives or any other life form. And they failed. Whereas in the current cycle, Shepard is that paragon of respecting other cultures, depending on how you play the character. But pretty much regardless of whether or not you go full renegade, Shepard still kind of has that respect for the differences of other species continuing to persist. He is not attempting to assimilate anyone. He's not attempting to provide that homogeneity across species. He is attempting to unify them based on their commonalities and to say that those differences are what make the unification more valuable. The fact that we all have our different strengths and things that join us together so that we can work in the same direction is what makes the current cycle the one that succeeds.
I think there's something interesting to add on top of that as well. We talked for X amount of time about things that didn't seem directly related to ED, but I also didn't feel like it ever really became irrelevant. Because like you said, she reflects so much of the themes of the game within herself. And I love that point of hitting on Javik there, because it also hits again on the ED and Dr. Afa question, where you have the imposition of unity, which is what the Reapers would do, and it's what ED does. Or then the choice of unity, and all these banners coming together and choosing to, in the way that the galaxy does, and the way that everyone else on the ship does, with Commander Shepard. So you also get this little reflection of the Prothean cycle in the way that ED chooses to absorb Dr. Afa, which gives me another reason, that I find her so unpleasant.
Banana, what do you want to put Edie? Because I have her as A, and I think Com, you said a C?
I'm actually edging between a C and a B. I'm going to go for B, because for all the things that I don't like about the way that she's brought in, I think she has a very interesting story. A lot of her interactions with Joker, and this can be in 2 and 3, are really, really delightful. I thoroughly enjoy them. I don't use her that much on the battlefield, never really have, didn't find a role for her. But I think, there's plenty of good individual story moments around her that I find so interesting and so much more enjoyable. And if I think about her relative to James, who I think ended up with a C, she's got to be one above.
ED doesn't get a higher ranking for me is Tally's in Mass Effect 3. I don't need another full tech.
Yeah.
I have Tally, and Tally's already an S tier. You were running at a disadvantage from moment one, Edie. not only did you steal that body and choose to be a sex bot, but you're competing with one of my favorite Mass Effect characters for their role in combat. Like, you were doomed from the start.
And let's not forget that the sex bot Edie cannot compare with the sex beast of Tali. Not a chance.
Exactly. You are an inferior version of Tali in every way. But I think the fact that we just talked about Edie exclusively, or issues related specifically to Edie for almost like an hour and a half by herself, shows how interesting of a character she is. So she has to be somewhere up there. So I have Edie at a B.
Okay. So she's a B, then, I think, even if Com has her as a C.
No, I would push her into
B. At her as a B.
Yeah.
Well, I have an A and 2 B's, so it would be a B, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I still want my individual mark to be noted.
Yeah.
No.
Oh, all right.
I like that your conclusion was you had her as an A, I had her as a B, so she's a B, regardless of what Com said.
Yeah, we already knew what Com said. He said a B, so yeah.
Yeah, but you said
You said I said a C.
But I said even if it was a C, it would make it a B. That's what I said.
That's still disregarding everything about what makes me me. You've dehumanized me. You've reduced me to the letter B.
Yeah, if you made her a D, then it would still.
Okay, F.
Okay, F. Then now it's a D.
Yeah.
Finally.
Can we move Legion down in the tier list?
You know, I mean, it's hard to go below F.
Yeah. Just the one character that shares your name. Even though the character is tremendously interesting, I have to take points off.
Yeah. Why did you
for
make him so
your
low?
behavior?
It's not a reflection on the on the character. It's a reflection on the podcast.
Yeah.
Does this podcast have a soul? No.
Oh, I think we've answered that very clearly.
So we'll probably end it right there. Appreciate everybody listening and watching. And remember, we are on YouTube and all the audio channels as well, including Apple, Amazon. I'm trying to remember Spotify. Spotify is the biggest one that gets a lot of plays. So we'll check you guys later. Care.